Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weis. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Matt Putra. Matt helps the owners of e-commerce brands and agencies in the UK, US, and Canada scale their businesses with more cash and less stress. As a fractional CFO and an active e-commerce investor, Matt knows what it takes to both minimize risk and optimize for growth. Matt, thank you very much for being my guest on today's episode of CFO Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the ideal financing structure for e-commerce brands and how to manage the cash flow for e-commerce businesses to preserve cash. I'm really looking forward to learning from you, so let's get started.
Sure.
First, and as always, let's start with you and your career journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, my career has been a bit circuitous. I started off as a young adult, basically sweeping floors at a metal recycling plant. I would say that I moved fairly quickly into a management role, and which is where I learned that I loved business. So I was there for almost 10 years and then made a change, and I was a business analyst then at another small manufacturer. And from the business analyst role, implemented an ERP system and then got into the accounting side of things. And then I switched my degree from finance to accounting. So I finished my degree when I was about 30, bachelor's degree. And when we were implementing this ERP with the data and financials and all these things, I started sort of to just see the power of data, the power of knowing accounting. One of the things we did was we changed how we were doing quoting. So I built a new sort of quoting application using like a total cost, basically like finding a way to allocate all business costs to machine hours. And in so doing, we ended up really understanding the cost to provide service. And what we ended up doing was quoting less for jobs because we had a better understanding of how our work sectors were costed, but we ended up winning more jobs. And so we built up more capacity, made more money, increased gross margin by 20%, increased net profit 20% year on year. So that was sort of when I fell in love with finance and accounting as a profession. And then from there, I went to an accounting firm. And then from then, I was CFO, picked up by a private equity group. And private equity group is where I ran everything. So audit, tax, insurance, literally everything the CFO would have to do. Got to do some deals, did about 15 million or so in deals. Total project costs were like $500 million. So that was really great. And then when COVID happened, I got to stop commuting 3 hours a day from my home to my downtown, and which meant I had a whole bunch more time with my family, kids. And so I told, hey, when COVID's over, I'm going to want to work more from home than I have before. And they said, oh, no, you have to go back to the office full time. And which point I quit. So from there, I had been working with some e-commerce business very opposite my desk, but loved it. And so then went full time into being a fractional CFO for e-commerce. That was about 3 years ago.
And today you are with 8X, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So tell me about 8X and what it is that they do.
Yeah. So I founded 8X in about, I think, 2019. And then I moved over full time in 2021. And what we do is we are fractional CFOs for e-commerce companies, brands, and agencies. We help people scale with more cash and less stress. So basically what we're doing is solving the problems, taking the pain away for founders that are running their own finances that are unsure they're doing it correctly. We come in, we support, we basically end up being your finance department. So you have a CFO, you'll have an analyst, and sometimes you'll have other supports around you, like supply chain or data or whatever else you might need, we'll provide. And we just help you make sure your finances are locked down, a good plan. We do some risk management, of course, on the plan. But the goal is some people want to exit, some people want a legacy business, and our goal is to help you get what you want.
And tell me how you came to focus on e-commerce businesses.
Yeah, very accidental in some ways. I had a very good friend named Jordan West, who also has a podcast, and he had an e-commerce brand. And in 2019, he said, hey, I'm looking for help with modeling cash flow and kind of managing things. I was like, yeah, I can help with that. And so I did. And then he started a marketing agency shortly thereafter, focusing on e-commerce brands and called Up Growth Marketing. Basically, I followed him into the space. He was just telling me how great the community is. I said, well, if it's great, I'll join it too. I realized, of course, that niching down makes it easier to get noticed. And so that's just what I did. I focused on e-commerce, followed Jordan, and sort of been building this business based on e-commerce since then.
And talk to us about how 8X helps e-commerce businesses with cash flow management.
Sure. The biggest thing that we do, the most important thing that we do is build you a forecast. And our forecasts are month by month, income statement, cash flow statement, balance sheet, and they extend out for 3 years. That forms the basis of everything that we do. All of our advice, all of our recommendations come from there. What we do is we build it based off your trends in Shopify, QuickBooks, and we just kind of dig into everything that we think we might want to know about your business. From there, we build a model. And our models are, the most important thing about them is that we try to make them realistic. You have the big four accounting firms. They build financial models for people, but what they do typically is they take someone's input and then they just build a model from their input. What we do is we take our input, we benchmark against the clients that we work with today and that we have worked in the past. We look at industry trends, we look at research and so on, and we adjust the inputs to what we think would be more realistic. And so what you get is an offer that's robust. It's not a dream. It's something that we think is achievable. And sometimes it ends up telling somebody, we told somebody once that they're going to go bankrupt the way the current model's working. And so again, our job is to tell you the truth as much as we can. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's all based off this financial forecast.
And I'm just curious, what are some trends that you're seeing in e-commerce? I'm sure during COVID, it must have been quite booming times, but what are you seeing today?
Yeah, 2021 was a wonderful year for a lot of people. 2022 was a little bit tougher, and I think 2023 has been even tougher than that. Rising cost of acquisition, which in 2022 was really bad, and normalized a little bit in 2023. We're seeing some things normalize a little, so supply chain timing, some of those things are coming back to the mean, so to speak. Shipping costs are coming back to sort of normal. But I think the trends are that a lot of businesses, 2022 was very difficult. And so people are trying to recover from that, but it's just difficult. Like there's more advertisers than ever, more advertising money than ever, driving up CPMs, driving up cost of acquisition, and which is the big struggle, right? Staffing has been hard. Those are the big things, I would say. But yeah, it's made it a lot tougher for e-commerce companies.
And when it comes to managing cash flow for e-commerce businesses, what are some of the common mistakes you see businesses making?
Yeah, mistake number one is loading up on fixed costs too early. So making the hires where you really need them, getting an office where you need it. Anything where the cost is fixed, adding those costs, I would say that's the number one mistake that I see is sort of the entrepreneurs are always optimists and we need them to be that. But there is an expectation that revenue will catch up to the cost that one adds. And oftentimes it takes longer for revenue to catch up than we think, which means our margins are pinched a bit longer than we think, which means our cash flow suffers a bit more than we think. And so I would say fixed costs is the biggest one. I mean, the rule of thumb for an e-commerce brand is that any fixed cost you add requires 4 to 5 times revenue to cover it. And so just be careful. The other one is not actively managing cash flow, meaning most people don't have a forecast. And so have something. If you're not working with a CFO, just have something. Take your QuickBooks profit and loss, and then just type in numbers to the right of it, what you think each month is going to do. Have some idea what your costs are going to be. And before you make decisions, go into your forecast, whatever it is, simple, complex, whatever you want to do. Go in there and input the changes into the forecast and see what changes with profit and cash flow. That would be the number two thing is it's just not typically actively managed. Then the other would be over ordering inventory. I would say is another one. Inventory, if your inventory not moving, you basically have stacks of cash sitting on a shelf. And so my recommendation for most people is to order less than they think they need. Be ruthless about cutting SKUs that aren't performing Yeah, because minimize the cash sitting on the shelf you can't use.
And how is it that you determine the right balance between holding on to cash and investing in growth? Because I imagine that can't be easy.
It is very tricky, very, very tricky. Before 2021, yeah, it's not like I knew everything was coming at first, but it's always been tricky because nobody wants to hang on to 500 grand worth of cash that just sits there and does nothing. However, every brand that I talked to and worked with would have benefited from 500 grand cash sitting there doing nothing when they went through 2022 and into 2023. And so the way that I think about it now is it's all risk management. And so I like people to have between 3 to 6 months operating expenses in cash, ideally. It's not always something that's possible in the short term, but that would be the goal. And it just makes you more resilient, more robust to surprises, I suppose. And so that's the rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months operating expenses. And other than that, you'd want to invest for growth, I would say.
And the next couple of questions are about suppliers and relationships with them. So, how is it that e-commerce businesses can negotiate effectively with suppliers to ensure that they're getting the best deal, but still maintaining the relationship with that supplier?
Yeah. So, yeah, first and foremost, it's about relationship, right? So you need to preserve your relationship. So obviously, we're talking kindness and some transparency and having frank conversations when you need to have them. There is another strategy that a good friend of mine, named Kevin, sort of came up with. The concept is called nibbles. And what you're doing with nibbles is you're asking your supplier for small things on a regular basis. So not big concessions. So for example, most people who order from China need to pay a 30% deposit to get the order moving, and then 70% before the order ships. So a nibble would be a supplier, could I pay 25% deposit, 75% on shipping? Typically, for a small request like that, you're going to get a yes. And then you do that, you execute that, maybe next quarter, say, hey, supplier, instead of 75% before you ship, can I pay 50% for your ship and the remaining 25 when it lands on my shore? You might get yes, you might get a no, but you're getting the idea. And that is asking for small things regularly rather than one big thing. So what you could say to the suppliers, look, can I have 30-day terms? That's a huge departure from the 20, 30, 70 deposit structure. And so then I would say, ask for small things, ask for things regularly, pay on time, communicate with them when you may not be able to pay on time. When communication is key. So just keep lines of communication open and then try to understand what they want, try to understand how they're managing risk. And so sometimes what you might do is you might get a letter of credit from your bank or a lender in which the bank guarantees your payment to the supplier. So the supplier's more willing to give you terms, things like that. So it's all about give and take communication, really.
And I'm just curious, do you see suppliers holding more power in the relationship?
Typically.
And how can you balance that?
Tough one.
If there is a way at all to
Yeah,
balance it.
For the average business under 10 million,
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of power and you're never going to. For most suppliers, if you make up, let's say you think you make up 10% or more of the supplier's business, is kind of where you have a little more leverage. But most smaller businesses aren't going to be that for the bigger suppliers.
I was just going to say, I'm sure that's where asking for small things multiple times comes in handy as opposed to asking for something really big.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even with someone that you do have power over, you don't really want to muscle them around.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the relationship too, right? So you should still, you can be a bit more aggressive, of course, but still just be careful, right? Because you do need them as much as they need you usually.
And in your experience, what financing strategies have been most successful for e-commerce businesses?
Yeah, so the structure that I like the most, which is the hardest to put in place, I'll give you, and then I'll give you some alternates maybe. So the structure I like the most is where, first of all, you need to understand your working capital base. What that means is sort of your current assets, inventory, prepaids, accounts receivable, cash, and other current assets, minus your current liabilities, which is basically your AP and some credit cards and things like that. What is the average dollar figure throughout a typical year? That would be your working capital base. I like to finance about maybe 70% of that work, maybe 60%, 70% of that working capital base with a term loan from a bank. So this is one where you're going to go to, if you're in the US, SBA, or your bank. In Canada, it would be BDC. In the UK, I believe there's export development Wales, and there's other stuff in the UK side as well, Britain side as well. And so you're going to ask them for a term loan for 3 to 5 year term, ideally. And they're going to give you a loan for 60% of that number, the working capital base, and you're going to pay it down over 5 years. When the term is almost up, you're going to get a new one and roll the money into another term loan. Now, that's that part. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to try to get a line of credit. Now, you could talk to Wayflyer. You can talk to Wayflyer has a very great enterprise product for companies over 10 million in sales. They're a good option for that. You could talk to, again, your bank is an ideal place for line of credit. You're going to get a line of credit. Line of credit helps you manage the bucks in your working capital base. So let's say where you have to stock up before a sales season, your line of credit will help you do that. And you're going to finance. So again, you're going to have 30% of this is kind of financed with just your operating cash retained earnings. And this bump you're going to finance with your line of credit. The next thing you're going to have in place is like a Shopify, ClearGo, Wayflyer, Kick Further. One of these things you're just going to have at the ready. And those are for managing the extreme spikes in the ordering patterns that you have, the working capital base inventory needs that you have. And so if there's a very big order, very big deposit, you have to get in, get out, or a big payment, as a Shopify would be best handled by a big payment to get your supplier to ship. So that's 70% after the deposit. You can use that, but you don't want to use that for something that's going to take 6 months to get here because you'll have paid off the loan before the end of 6 months. So so you have your term loan, which is 60% of your working capital base. You have a line of credit that sits on top. Ideally, maybe it would cover 10 to 20% of working capital base. And then you have your Shopify at the ready. PayPal is a good one. Actually, if people out there, if you can get a PayPal loan, APRs on those are much better than Shopify and usually Wayflyer, ClearGo also. So those three things is the ideal. And now why?
Yeah.
So why? Yeah, big one. Now this I saw on LinkedIn the other day. Somebody from Toronto had a card or a line of credit with Jeeves. Jeeves turned their line of credit to zero availability overnight without warning. They had missed payments. And so that is what happens when you have a line of credit. A line of credit is a demand loan, meaning that the bank can shut off your access to it at any point that they wish. They can also demand repayment. Now, most banks don't demand repayment, but they can shut it off. And so most people prefer to have a line of credit in place of this term loan. But if you do that and the economy changes, your bank can limit your access to those funds. So that is why we have a term loan managing your base of working capital, because the base is there always. And so the money should be there always, not something that you have 6 months and pay back already. So that's why you have a term loan, because it limits your risk of exposure to bank action. Then you have a line of credit for those bumps, because it's just helpful to have something that you draw down on and you pay back as your kind of the seasons of your business are cyclical and so on. And then Shopify is just that's an emergency money that you can pull if you really have to. But again, I want to emphasize that if you can find a term loan from somewhere, definitely use that as part of your strategy. It's just longer term money. The payments are better. There's less risk of bank action kind of giving you some problems. And for e-commerce brands, a good term loan provider right now is Sellers5. They have been doing term loans from 12 to 18 months, which is on the longer side for the e-commerce landscape. Obviously, you can do SBA or Canada's BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, or Development Bank of Wales, or the Australian or UK counterparts. Those would be a really great place to get a term loan from. If you have a very good relationship with your bank and you've been profitable for a couple of years, you can go straight to your bank and get a better term loan, even than these government agencies. Be prepared to offer personal guarantee. That's the ideal structure.
And what are some of the biggest challenges that e-commerce businesses face when it comes to financing?
Sure. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people haven't been profitable or around for very long. So those are the two big ones when it comes to financing, right? Now, I mean, and that would be specifically the term loan piece. It's hard to get a term loan if you're not been around very long, or you haven't been profitable for very long, or you're not profitable, right? Because the bank's giving money for a number of years. So you have to imagine that they need to believe you're going to be around in 3 years. And so that's been difficult for people to kind of prove. The other thing is it's really the economy right now. Money was very easy to access in 2021 and even 2022, for the most part, for the first half at least. And then the economy has changed. There's now, lenders are very conservative. Even some of the most cavalier e-commerce lenders that are out there have become incredibly conservative. And so it's all about profit. It's all about unit economics. It's all about customer economics. And those are the things one needs to prove to a bank. You just know how to manage these things, even if you're not profitable. Now there's a way out to be profitable in the very short term, not 12 months, like 3 to 6 months. And that would be the biggest struggles that exist today in getting financing.
And I should have asked this before, but where did the name 8X come from?
Yeah, I've always had a hard time thinking of a name for business, even in business school. And one day I read it. Oh, there's an old Japanese proverb called "Falls out times stand up 8." And as an homage to entrepreneurship, I thought it's a little cheesy. But as an homage to entrepreneurship, I thought that would be a name because as entrepreneurs, we all fall many times, and you just have to keep showing up. And typically, that's the way. Just be there long enough.
Yeah, I love that. So let's go back to cash flow again.
Sure.
When it comes to managing cash flow, what key metrics should e-commerce businesses be monitoring? What is it that they should be looking at on a daily or weekly basis?
100%. So the easiest one, first and foremost, is net cash flow. So just how much cash is business producing? And the way to do this is just look at your bank balance from one week to the next. What's the difference? And put that on a Google Sheet. Look at it every single week. Have your BA or somebody in the business put that on a Google Sheet and send it to you every week. Very easy. The next thing I'd like to look at is sort of operating cash flow. Now, if they have regular bookkeeping being done, they should be able to get a handle on this. Operating cash flow is what the business uses cash for, excluding things like lending, paying back the loans, buying equipment, or those kind of things. And it's a measure of are the core operations of your business producing cash or taking cash away? And so I would love people to look at that number. Again, that's one you can only look at every month when your bookkeeper's done. Look at net cash flow during the week, look at operating cash flow at the end of the month. And one more that I'd love people to look at is cash conversion cycle. It's just a measure of if you pay your supplier today, how long is it going to take you to collect the cash from your customers? Typically, it's 60 to 120 days. It's a very wide range, but retail is like 75 days usually. And so if you can reduce that number every quarter, reduce it by 1 or 2 days, you're going to be swimming in cash in a few quarters.
And it seems the last few years have been tumultuous between COVID and now the economy. How can businesses forecast the future when the future seems nearly impossible to predict?
Man, that is such a good question. The way to do it is to do the forecast, but you have to do a number of forecasts is the way you handle uncertain future. What you do and what we do is you make a best case, a worst case, and a base case scenarios. Base case meaning this is just what you really think is going to happen. Best case is what if some things go your way? Worst case is what if a bunch of things don't go your way? So C goes up, Black Friday doesn't do as well as you wanted, things like that. And ideally, reality is caught between those scenarios somewhere. Now you have to build them such that reality should be caught. But if it is, you can then look at a range of scenarios and think of ways to manage each one. You can also decide on investment based on scenarios. So what I mean by that is we were working with a client in Wales, and we had these best worst with a base case set up. The reason we did them was, of course, because you have to when things are uncertain, but also they had an R&D plan in which they wanted to spend 150 grand developing a new product. But we needed to know what the business was going to do. So we made these 3 scenarios. Every month, what we did is we checked which of these scenarios is coming true. For the first month, it was base case. Then it started looking like the best case. And so we knew that if the business was either between the base or the best, that we could spend the 150 grand on R&D. And we decided that after, I believe it was 5 or 6 months of allowing the business to run as normal and seeing which case was happening, then we would decide to make the investment or not. And so you can use these scenarios to look at timing, what's actually happening. And if your worst case is really bad, like let's say you run out of money in your worst case, well, now you know that there's something to be worked on. It's a risk management piece. And so basically the fix is you can't use just one forecast. You have to use 3 to 5 options, and you have to build them realistically and like Chicken Little would in some ways. And you need to, before these scenarios happen, you need to have planning in place to manage them. And that's the way you do it. You just have to kind of ready for anything rather. Very risk-based kind of management, I think, is the key right now.
That's great advice. And having made it to the role of CFO, and it seems like you really structured your career in a way that fits your life. So what advice do you have for other CFOs out there or aspiring CFOs? How do you get to the role of CFO?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways I am lucky, but I was 27 when I decided I was going to be a CFO, and I was 32 when it happened. And the way that it's not all just what I did. There's some luck, but anyway, the way that I did it was for aspiring CFOs. That was my goal. That's what I wanted to do. So every job I looked at was, how is this going to get me closer to that role? And I picked working at small companies over large companies because in a small company, you get to touch everything. Often you get to work side by side an owner or CEO. You get to just touch more parts of the business. And so where this really took off for me was that manufacturer where I was a business analyst. Basically speaking, for those weird way to say that, but basically with that small manufacturer, I came in as a business analyst, implemented the ERP, realized that it was all this data. So then I just did stuff on my own time. During the day, I would be doing my implementation and training and change management. At night, I would be opening my computer, digging into the ERP, looking at data, all these things, and to try to build this quoting application that I built. Didn't build it at work, built it on my own time, and then showed up with it one day, and the boss liked it. And so the key is having a portfolio of successes. When you want to go to your next job, have a bunch of things that you've done that you can point to, that you've helped a business succeed in some way. And as you look to move vertically, you need that. And so I would say for most people, you have a day job, sure. Whatever your day job is, if you want to be an executive, you should probably be doing side projects that no one's asked you to do that are high impact. And then one day just show up to work with a project and impress people or impress the boss. When you do that, again, you're just kind of proving how motivated you are. But again, having a bunch of success that, and obviously you write these down. This is what I did. This is how much profit we made. This is how long it took. And these are all really important things to say in your interviews when you're looking for a vertical move. Otherwise, as a CFO, embrace uncertainty, embrace ambiguity, be able to understand all the aspects of a business, not just finances. And then, other than that, it's all about relationships. So learn how to build relationships quickly, learn how to build trust and keep it, learn how to communicate. That's what's fine. For other CFOs, look, it's a tough job, especially right now in any business. And I don't know, we're desperately needed and glad to be part of the community of CFOs.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Thank you very much for sharing. So last question, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What keeps you motivated and loving what you do?
I would say I love having an impact on the people I work with. I don't think of that I work for businesses. I work for small business owners. And so meeting the people, the clients that I work with, they're not a name, they're a logo. It's like a person. And so for me, that's always been a motivator. I've always been a people person. I've always cared about people. And so I love positively impacting someone's life, which you can do, right? You can take the stress away if you build these 3 scenarios and you can tell them how to manage them. You can see the stress fall off their shoulders. I love helping people manage problems, fix things. That for me is why I built this business and why the team that we have today is aligned around the same goal as well. We're all about the people that own the businesses and helping their lives be better. That's the main thing. And of course, at the root of it all is my family, right? My wife and my kids. I have 4 kids. And so providing for them and having a life that we enjoy is hugely, motivating.
I love that. Matt, thank you so much for being my guest today.
This was wonderful. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for finding the time to be here with us today and sharing all of your experience and knowledge. And I wish you and 8X all the best.
Thank you. You too.
And to all of our listeners, please tune in next week. And until then, take care.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.